Well, we should have got more seats, really. But good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, and thank you, everyone, for coming. My name's Dean Tyler. I'm the Global Head of Fixed Income at Exotics Capital, a dedicated emerging market global investment bank. I'm absolutely thrilled here today to be introducing an excellent delegation from Zimbabwe. For the second time, actually, we hosted a delegation in New York this year, but this one's even more distinguished than the last one that we brought. Zimbabwe, obviously a country with a wealth of natural resources, fertile land, and most importantly, one of the most highly educated populations on the continent. I won't keep you too long, so what I'll love to do now is hand you over to the newly appointed Professor Ncube, the Finance Minister, who will introduce the rest of the delegation. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, good afternoon. Your Excellency, President of Zimbabwe, Mnangagwa, welcome, sir. Thank you for finding time to grace this occasion and have a conversation with investors. I'm Mthuli Ncube. I'm the Minister of Finance for Zimbabwe, and I'm pleased to have been appointed. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that investors are happy, but more importantly, contribute to fixing the Zimbabwe economy. The format of today's program is as follows. The Master of Ceremony is my colleague Dean from Exotics, and then I'm going to introduce the President in a moment to give his remarks. After that, I'll fill in the gaps with a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see if that's necessary in the first place. The President usually gives very good presentations. And then after that, the Governor of the Central Bank, John Mangudya, will make his remarks as well, make sure that we understand what's going on the monetary policy front. And then finally, what's the name again? Chris, yeah. He will, your friend. Yeah, Chris, yeah. Yeah, that's right. He will make some remarks, especially around the arrears clearance in terms of external debt. And then we open up to Q&A. I promise to get you out of here in 1.5 hours, if not less. Thank you. May I take this opportunity then to introduce His Excellency Emmerson Mnangangwa, the President of Zimbabwe. He's an illustrious freedom fighter, in Zimbabwe, delivered independence in 1980. He has been in and out of, he has been in government, but in and out of different ministries within government, justice, defense, security, vice president, and now our president. It is my singular honor to present His Excellency Mnangagwa to make his remarks. Thank you, sir.
May you please pray, take your seats. Our Director of Ceremonies, Zimbabwe's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, Dr. Shaba. Oh, yes, okay, there you are. Then our Zimbabwe ambassador to USA, Temba, thank you. Honorable ministers and senior government officials who are present, organizers of this investor forum, American business persons here present, and another who may not be American. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I wish to thank you for organizing this investor forum, which provides a unique opportunity for us to interact with business people from the United States of America on investment prospects and opportunities in Zimbabwe. Let me, on the outset, state that my administration is determined to build a new, open, and prosperous Zimbabwe by pursuing a robust engagement and re-engagement policy with all members of the international community for mutually beneficial outcomes. As such, Zimbabwe stands ready to enhance and improve economic relations as well as welcome investments from the United States of America. Our attendance to this forum is timely as we seek to revive and rebuild our economy. Distinguished guests, Zimbabwe is on a bold course to modernize and industrialize every sphere of the country through a vibrant private sector-led economic recovery. The key tenets of our economic agenda include sweeping and comprehensive economic reforms which foster an investment-friendly environment that promotes and protects private enterprise, improves the ease and the cost of doing business, reduces the country risk perception, creates employment, eradicates corruption, and enhances public sector accountability, transparency, and good governance. My country has a vision to become a middle-income economy with a per capita income of about $3,500. At the time I took over on the 24th of November last year, per capita income was around 900. In 8 months, it is now gone to 1,200. And by 2030, I believe we should be able to reach 3,500 per capita income. With increased investment, decent jobs, broad-based empowerment, free from poverty and corruption by 2030. We are fully cognizant that foreign direct investment will play a major role in the attainment of this noble vision. Hence, we invite visitors amongst you to travel this journey with us. On the political front, we successfully held our harmonized general elections as scheduled on 30th July 2018, which were peaceful, free, fair, and democratic for the first time around. We are thus determined to further entrench democratic tenets, constitutionalism, and tolerance for the good of our people to ensure sustainable economic development and prosperity for our people. Ladies and gentlemen, the growth of trade and investment is expected to drive our development agenda. Zimbabwe stands ready to enter a new era of relations with the United States of America and pursue economic cooperation and further reignite mutually beneficial trade and economic cooperation between our countries and peoples. The onus is now on the private sectors of the two countries to complement my government's efforts in this drive to grow our economy. To date, one of the key reforms that we have implemented is the amendment of the indigenization and economic empowerment. As part of our ongoing economic reform measures, we will continue to guarantee the protection of private property rights. Equally, we will observe bilateral investment promotion and protection agreements, BIPA. Let me assure you that all foreign investments will be safe in Zimbabwe, and the foreign investors are free to repatriate their investment proceeds in accordance with our laws. My administration has designated both commodity-specific and geographic areas as special economic zones with favorable incentives for investors. My Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Reserve Bank will be able to articulate on that issue. I'm therefore inviting American businesses to invest in these zones and will stand ready to facilitate such investment. In this regard, investors are free to leverage on Zimbabwe's resource endowments and geostrategic location to produce for SADC, Africa, and the world. The enactment of the Zimbabwe Investment and Business Facilitation Bill and establishment of one-stop shop investment center will also give greater impetus to our commitment to open up our economy. Furthermore, my government is reforming the public sector to eliminate bureaucratic red tape, bureaucratic bottlenecks, and enhance efficiency and responsiveness. We are resolved to make Zimbabwe an attractive and a safe investment destination where capital feels safe. In addition, I have committed that my administration will ensure policy clarity, consistency, transparency, and predictability. Distinguished guests, Zimbabwe is endowed with vast and untapped natural resources. And again, my ministers will elaborate. Investment opportunities exist in various areas which include agriculture and the related agro-value chain industries, agriculture equipment, manufacturing, and irrigation development. Opportunities are also abound for American investors to participate in infrastructure development, projects in areas such as hydroelectric power, projects in dam construction, among others. You may also consider exploring business opportunities in the development and modernization of our road, rail, and air networks, as well as information and communication technology connectivity. Our mining sector continues to present lucrative prospects, especially in gold, platinum mining, lithium, value addition, and beneficiation, among others. Zimbabwe's lithium and the coal bed methane reserves are one of the largest in Africa. Hence, opportunities exist for the exploration, exploitation, and development of green energy solutions. I've only mentioned a few, but out of the 61 known minerals, I think we have 98% of them. The tourism sector is one of the key contributors to our economy and offers diverse products. We are inviting investments towards increasing our tourism and leisure infrastructure, such as the construction of modern hotels and golf courses. When I was in Davos, I met staffers from the Trump administration. I had hoped to meet President Trump in Davos, but he delayed, and I had to leave before he arrived. And I told these people that if President Trump would wish, I would offer him ground at the Victoria Falls in National Park. We have Wildlife National Park at Victoria Falls. But I'd offer President Trump ground to build state-of-the-art golf course. So as you play, you can be able to see the Big Five. American tourists are always welcome to visit Zimbabwe and enjoy our vast safari and hunting products. My government is also keen to modernize and expand our health service infrastructure. We are equally determined to resuscitate and strengthen the pharmaceutical industries, and investments are invited in this respect. In addition to the above, foreign investors are invited to explore investing in our public entities. We are ready to consider joint ventures, public-private partnerships, build, operate, own, transfer investments models, among others, that will unlock economic value on a win-win basis. In all these endeavors, my government will continue to ensure the economic involvement and participation of women and youths in my country. May I conclude by inviting American businesses to also consider specific investments in any one of Zimbabwe's 10 provinces, which offer diverse natural endowments in the respective provinces. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, indeed, and indeed, I repeat, Zimbabwe is open for business, and we look forward to welcoming you in my country. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for those remarks. Zimbabwe is truly open for business. I just want to fill in some gaps with a bit of detail for those of you who don't know much about Zimbabwe but are keen to follow through and invest. Zimbabwe will be joining a group of 6 countries in the next 2 years, which are the fastest growing countries in Africa, growing at about 6% per annum. So it will be Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Ghana, Tanzania, Ivory Coast. What have I left out? I think I've covered all of them. All growing above 6%. Those are going to be the fastest growing countries in the world. And that's going to happen there. I'm just showing a chart, and you expect to see, if the colors are not clear, the Africa graph push up a lot higher. These are the fastest growing countries, and that includes Zimbabwe. We have a policy direction in terms of vision. The President has launched the Vision 2030, as he remarked, which will move Zimbabwe to a middle-income country with an income per capita of $3,500 by year 2030, through the pillars of stronger governance, transparency, macro stability, inclusive growth, infrastructure investment, and finally, social development in a way that creates a cohesion. We have a strategy for enacting the vision, which we're calling the Transitional Stabilization Program, which His Excellency will launch in the next 4 weeks, which tries to then drill down to see how this can be enacted. And a key pillar of that is macro policy, which I look after. But a slew of sectors will be targeted: macro policy, institutional arrangements in terms of strengthening institutions, the growth of the services sector, investing in public infrastructure, particularly in inclusive infrastructure, developing human capital, and of course, governance reforms. Let me remind you, those of you who may not know much about Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe has got an excellent human capital base in terms of literacy levels, levels of education. It is up there. Absolutely. It has an abundance of natural resources. Top 40 minerals in the world are found in Zimbabwe. It has got a favorable location right in the center of Southern Africa with good infrastructure. Even if you go there now, there's good infrastructure for you to drive around. But we need more infrastructure to make sure that we have 99% coverage of the road networks, access to power, water, and sanitation. We're performing reforms, as His Excellency has enunciated, and the transitional plan will further enunciate that. We're pursuing a debt relief strategy or restructuring strategy so that we can catch up with our arrears which will allow us to unlock the flow of capital from the rest of the world. In terms of the economy, in 30 seconds, our sectors will be agriculture, services. Actually, the services sector has grown significantly. It's now 19.5% of the economy. Agriculture is about 11.1%. Agriculture is growing at about 14% per annum right now. The fastest growing sector is mining, which is growing at about 30% and is a big driver of the growth that I spoke about, and so forth and so forth. Those of you who care about labor participation rates, that's what they look like. In fact, we've got a high female labor ratio participation, and I wanted to show you this chart specifically to show that we have a good gender balance, at least strive to get towards one in our work environment. On the just broader macro figures, as I said, we're projecting 4.2% this year. We're likely to be at 6%. We'll be dealing with the fiscal imbalances that the President has already mentioned to make sure that our budget deficit drops to single digit and is able to work in conjunction with monetary policy to create a stable macro environment through a variety of strategies, by expanding the tax base, make sure that there's bigger coverage, and also controlling expenditure, dealing with corruption, and improving the efficiency of collection from our borders and from within. In terms of the fiscal balances, our current account is well behaved at minus 2.6% of GDP average, so we're not getting any risk on that front. I must say that those of you who are investing in the equity market, the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange has cumulatively outperformed the American market. It has returned 2,000% since March 2009. The S&P, the American market, has done 140%. Invest in Zimbabwe. That is the message. You make money. And you know what? Given the literacy rate of Zimbabwe of the order of 85%, you compare that to GDP per capita. Really, we should be up there. That stock of human capital should deliver more productivity and up there. So there's a gap that we have to traverse. It's going to happen. And that's what we mean by getting to that upper middle income status in 2030. I'm just giving, I compare Zimbabwe, Kenya, and so forth, and South Africa, so that you can see where we stack up. I'll just move faster. In terms of exports, the bulk of our exports is the mining sector. It produces 61% of all our export revenue. So it's gold. The governor will elaborate on the gold sector. It's platinum, it's chrome, and other minerals. This year we had already was showing that there will be a record gold output going forward, and we want to do more to support the sector, because that's what will help us build gold reserves for us to have a stronger monetary policy and exchange rate policy environment going forward. You need reserves to have a strong currency, as you can imagine. So I'll move faster. In terms of imports, we import quite a bit: fuel, wheat, cooking oil, and so forth. But our current account is very disciplined. As I said, minus 2.6% of GDP is not bad. Inflation has been well behaved, hovering between 2 and 6%. Currently, we're at about 4%. We think it may creep up. I was watching the prices. I must say, the last week, we just hit that 6% mark. But it's still reasonable, in my view. I don't think we should be able to go above that. Now, in terms of minerals, there's a map of what it looks like in terms of distribution. In terms of geological services, we have mapped the whole of Zimbabwe. We know what's where, and we know what to find, whatever minerals. I must hasten to say that the mining sector needs $11 billion of investment to unlock all the value that is underground. So that's an opportunity for you. Go for it. On the soft commodities front, agriculture, we're doing very well on tobacco, and again, the governor will elaborate. We had a record season this year on tobacco. We had what, 25? 250 million. Yeah, 250 million. It's incredible. It's the best season ever, I think, since in the last 40 years. in the life of the tobacco sector, this was the best year. That's what I'm hearing. So it's all looking good. Opportunities abound here where they're looking at maize, sugarcane, soybeans. The sector is open for business. We've run a very successful program, which His Excellency started when he was Vice President, called the Command Agriculture Program, Presidential Input Program, which has brought the bulk of our farmers into the more productive agricultural space, where they're looking at maize, at wheat. They are in there doing it and making sure that we're self-sufficient in food and we don't import as much. Now, manufacturing sector is quite diverse. Its growth is about 3%, so it's not been growing strongly. It's been impacted by the shortage of foreign currency, power costs, and so forth, but also competitiveness issues because we're using a hard currency, which is US dollar. It has benefits because that has stabilized inflation, but then the costs, as they say in economics, you benefit somewhere, you lose somewhere. That's it shows with the manufacturing sector only growing at 2.6%, just below 3% per annum. But it's well diversified, and the idea is to retool that sector and move the capacity utilization upwards. I happen to own a plastics factory myself, which I've owned for almost 30 years. I know the issues very, 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 very well on the ground when it comes to manufacturing. Now, on infrastructure, it's a great opportunity. The President talked about the public-private partnerships that he's pushing for you to be crowded into this space transparently and would like your resources in doing so. As government, we're going to upscale our capacity to work with you to make sure these PPPs work, they deliver value for you, and they deliver value for us as well, the Zimbabweans. We're very strong financial sector, as well capitalized. The governor can elaborate. I won't say more about that. All I can say that we just need more innovation in the financial sector, whether it's introducing exchange-traded funds, which I tried to do, and then while I was busy working on it, a week later I got a call that I should join the government, so I dropped it and joined the government. So, but I think Zimbabwe is great if you wanted to launch an exchange-traded fund, just to make sure there's an efficacy into your entry into the market or indeed exit, at least offer that to investors. It's 2,000% rate of return since March 2009. What more do you want, So the arrears issue, which my colleague will elaborate on, we're seized with this. We need to obviously complete phase now 1. We've paid off the IMF. We now need to deal with the African Development Bank and the World Bank. They rank pari passu. You can't clear one without clearing the other. So we need $2.2 billion to clear that. Once they are done, then we attack the next lot, which is the $4 billion, the Paris Club debt, which is bilateral, and we are going to begin to engage on that front. We'll say more when we're in Bali at the World Bank IMF annual meetings. We'll meet some of you. Our roadmap will be clearer as we go. But I must say that work has already started through in Lima. We call it the Lima process, which has allowed us to focus and narrow our roadmap. One day we'll be coming to you when all this is done for a Eurobond issue. We want to get there, get back into the market after a full credit rating from Moody's and Fitch and others. So I'm going to move faster. The Excellency has already mentioned that we amended the Indigenization Act. Now you can invest as a foreign investor. You don't need a local partner. It's not compulsory. Although I always say, you know what? If you have the right partner on the ground, that's also insurance because they know the terrain. They can move into the corridors for regulators and so forth, get you out of trouble. Some of the time, partner is always a good thing, but it's not compulsory. It's up to you. But we're seized with making sure that the ease of doing business environment is indeed easy. Indigenization Act was one way we did it. The President on Tuesday announced that we'll be amending the Companies Act so that it is easy then for investors to literally take a day to register a company online. Why not? And this whole slew of other reforms that will be enacting. I won't spend too much time on them. Maybe just to say that your investment is safe in Zimbabwe. We adhere to the law. We have the judiciary system that works. we will have an amicable legal resolution for any dispute through our court system. Here I've got, again, a list of legislative measures or other measures that will be enacted. The President announced these. I've only listed 10 of them. And now in his State of the Nation address to Parliament on Tuesday, the Companies and Other Entities Bill is number 1, and then a whole list of other things, the Mines and Minerals Act, the Gold Trade Bill, precious stones, and so forth, all the way down, including dealing with cybercrime, cybersecurity. We abide by the law, and we've got all the instruments for making sure that your investment is safe and you benefit and you enjoy that 2,000% rate of return I mentioned earlier. I won't talk about that. I won't talk about that. All I can say is Zimbabwe is open for business, and we hope to see you more and more in Harare going forward. I now take this opportunity to invite my colleague, Dr. Mangudya, the governor, to say his remarks before I transition to my colleague from Exotics. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Excellency, and your colleague from Exotic. Thank you for this meeting that you've organized for us. Once again, those who met in April, it's a great pleasure to see you again at this function. Your support has been vivid over the past 6 months. We're here in April, and some of you have already made commitments to assist Zimbabwe. And after these presentations, which are made by the President and the Minister of Finance, I hope to see much of the checkbooks in Harare. That's what we're waiting for. I just want to add a few things from what they said here. The first one is on the multi-currency system. Many people have asked us about the currency reforms. The currency reforms in Zimbabwe are very clear that they are dependent on a number of macroeconomic convergence issues, which are sometimes called economic fundamentals. The first fundamental factor that affects the currency reforms in Zimbabwe is what the minister has just talked about, our currency, so our fiscal imbalances. We need to find the right balance, which is sustainable for us to be able to have a currency in Zimbabwe. When we talk about fundamentals, it's also important to talk about import cover. We need at least 6 months cover to be able to minimize convergence risk. Conversion risk is when investors come to Zimbabwe and are unable to remit their funds back home. That is still a challenge in our country, and we're working on it. The minister has invited you to invest in our stock exchange, because it's doing very well. I know you would ask me, when are we getting that money back? And therefore, in the short term, we are asking for a patient capital, so that we can remit your dividends and your profits in the medium to long-term basis. We want us to be very honest with our situation, so at the end of the day, you invest with a long-term view as opposed to invest with a short-term view. The currency reforms will also depend on Zimbabwe's re-engagement with the rest of the world. Because the hindrance factor right now, which is there, is about our debt overhang, and also the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, both the original and as amended. That one, it has got a negativity in terms of raising funds. Access to foreign finance is limited by that act, in as far as it brings in reputational risks for those who want to invest in Zimbabwe. It increases the cost of doing business. It also discourages foreign banks to lend into Zimbabwe and force foreign institutions. Therefore, what the government is doing is to attend to those issues to ensure that Zimbabwe is part of the
country in the world that has got free access to financing. That act, what it does is that it discourages, it doesn't motivate those who want to invest in Zimbabwe. And as such, we do believe that with the passage of time, it is important that the businesses in the USA, if they invest more in Zimbabwe, as the clarion call from the president, and we've got Trump Towers in Vic Falls, I think it will be very important to do as a catalytic role of looking at the data positively, because it will be reduced. Because if you find that movement of funds will be definitely be increased, and that's very important. So I think the current issues, and therefore we are saying that it's not a short term, it is a medium, it's a process. It's not been a short term, but it's a medium process to do that. What we are working for right now as a central bank is to ensure that in the current reform is that the multi-currency system is maintained and strengthened. We want to strengthen the multi-currency system. What for? For two purposes. The first purpose is that it will motivate, it will give confidence to those who have money in Zimbabwe, that your money which is in Zimbabwe is US dollars, it remains as dollars. It's also going to promote and incentivize those who want to continue to deposit their money in the banks. So we'll be working on those monetary policy measures to ensure that at least we maintain it and improve the people's value. We are against the erosion of people's value. We want to maintain investors' value in Zimbabwe. The other issue that I thought I would talk about, as Mr. said, is our exports in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is basically dependent on 5 major products. That's gold, platinum, chrome, tobacco, and cotton. Those 5 products, they contribute to about 75 to 80% of our exports. With the gold being the largest at almost $100 million per month. This year, because of government efforts to support gold, we're now sitting at about 25 tons of gold for the first 8 months of the year, from January to August, which is a 70% increase from last year, January to August. Tobacco, 250 million kgs, was the highest since we started growing tobacco. So we have seen that because of the contribution of mining and agriculture, the anticipated growth of between 4.5 and 6% is achievable in 2018. We export chrome in the region of $40 million per month. Platinum, about $80 million per month. We do export our cotton this year, we're expecting $75 million. Why am I saying these figures? It's because those investors and hedge funds and financiers that want to provide the Zimbabwe with assistance of funding, it's possible to ring fence around our exports, notice of assignment given, exportables, for that at the end of the day we can structure a transaction around those products. For example, if today we were to provide Zimbabwe with a facility, say about $2.4 billion, that's what we're saying. And it's spread over 5 to 10 years. If it's 10 years, it means that we need to pay $240 million per year. If platinum is $80 million per month, it means that over $840 to $960 million per year. It means then if you open your collection account, where the process to go into, it means you mitigate payment risk. And the funds were paid outside Zimbabwe, because platinum is exported through Implast, men from Zimplast, and therefore take those notes of assignments. Therefore, you mitigate Zimbabwean risk by transferring the risk out of the country, and also take the risk on the producers. We've been doing that for a long period of time. But our major challenge right now is about access to finance, foreign finance. So the areas that we've got, that the minister has spoken about $2 billion, if well structured, we'll be able to pay. Over 5 years, it means we'll be paying about $480 million per year. Again, it's below the threshold of our exports, but that product only. So what makes it difficult in Zimbabwe is because we are living hand to mouth. We wait for the exports to trickle down and use it. Even any company in the world cannot run their company on a cash flow basis. Sometimes you give yourself terms 14 days to pay, 30 days to pay. Zimbabwe, we are a cash economy. It's a cash flow based. And these are the issues that hedge funders, finance. In the morning I spoke to some of the banks here, and we made it clear that we have capacity to pay. But our non-payment is not because of lack of capacity. It's not a structured way of payment which makes it difficult. So we're quite happy with those ones. We have offered to support us. We keep on praying that one day Zimbabwe will become the jewel of Africa, and as the hub, as Minister said, in terms of transportation hub of Africa. It's all our prayers, and those prayers can only be supported by your contribution to Zimbabwe. The banking sector in Zimbabwe remains very stable and very liquid. The banks are very liquid. Our liquidity ratio is about 62 to 65%. They are liquid, but people will say, why can it be liquid but you don't have foreign currency? There are two things. But look at the banking numbers, the money in the banks, and that's liquidity ratio is very high, but that liquidity cannot be converted into foreign currency. Therefore, what we have got is the conversion risk, not the liquidity risk. So when we are measuring the bank stability, we talk about their liquidity ratios. But the second thing that which need to fight for is now the conversion risk that we have got in Zimbabwe. And that is why we do believe that Zimbabwe requires your assistance, your support, and we definitely will pay for any obligation that we will get. We'll be able to do so with many banks, and we are opening our hearts to the American market, that the time is now for you to trust your funds in Zimbabwe, and for you to continue to put a good word in this great country in the world. I want to thank you for listening, and I obviously will take any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Dielman, and I'm a senior economist at Exotics Capital. Before I joined this position, I spent the last 4 years working at the IMF, where I was the head of debt sustainability modeling. In that role, I was part of the team that helped clear the arrears with the fund in 2016, and it's a very strange situation now to be standing up here with the Excellency, the Governor, Minister of Finance, to really start seeing this process coming to fruition. Something that 2 years ago, I think a lot of my colleagues were hoping we would see, but it's a process that's actually gone a lot faster than many of us had expected. After I'm done talking, I'll turn over to Q&A, and as a result, I'll try to make this relatively quick, because I think it's relatively clear that I'm the least interesting person on this stage, and obviously the delegation is why you're all here. The reason I was asked to speak to you was really to go over some of the numbers about the arrears, and exactly how the arrears clearance process might work. Now, as many of you know, the main issue that Zimbabwe faces is one of liquidity. It's a dollarized economy. They don't have the ability to print their own money. They're drastically short of reserves. And as a result, based on this cash basis, the economy just does not function at full potential. The output gap is absolutely enormous, and it's really the lack of dollars that's holding back the development of the country. Now the question is, how do we bring dollars into the country? Exports is the obvious answer. And the way you do that is by improving the economy on a structural basis. I think the presentations you've already heard so far have really addressed the issue of how do we improve the asset base of the country through tourism, through exports, etc., closing that output gap. But there is another side to that story and how we can improve the liquidity situation. And that's by reducing the liabilities. Zimbabwe currently has about a debt to GDP ratio of about 70%. About $6 billion are owed to domestic creditors, all of which is dollar denominated. Again, that makes it relatively difficult to pay off because you can't just print money and through seniorage inflate away your debt stock. Now, on the other side of that equation, there's about $7 billion, also dollar denominated, that's owed to external creditors. And it's that stock of debt that we're really interested in. So it's about 60% of the total debt. Now, of that debt, about 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion is owed to the World Bank. About 650 million is owed to the African Development Bank, a smaller amount to the European Investment Bank, and about 4.5 billion owed to Paris Club creditors, and some other, in smaller amounts, official bilateral creditors, including China. Now, you've heard a lot about arrears clearance, and the fact that Zimbabwe has run up arrears really since around 1999, 2000. Now the question is, why can't Zimbabwe just go through an arrears clearance process like we've seen in plenty of other countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa? Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, Chad in 2014, 15, and 16 through the completion of their HIPC process. Now, there's a few problems with that. For one, Chad likely will be the last HIPC and MDRI-based process that we will see. The IMF and the World Bank are pretty much through with that process. They view Chad as the final sort of completing process in that entire stage, and they are unlikely to revisit HIPC and MDRI. The other challenge is that Zimbabwe technically doesn't qualify for HIPC because the export base is actually too high. The irony of that is, of course, you're punishing a country for doing the right thing, and in terms of raising their exports, which is what we all hope to see going forward, it actually reduces the likelihood of ever seeing HIPC relief. And it's really the debt to export ratio that is the primary concern there. Now, regardless of HIPC, obviously going through the Paris Club, it's possible to receive Paris Club treatment and also receive debt relief. And that can be on an ad hoc basis, where the official creditors come together and decide the terms of that relief, either in full or a partial amount. It could be a maturity extension. We don't know what that might look like. You've also already heard about Lima terms. Those terms could be done on a Lima basis, they could be on Naples, Cologne, etc. We just don't know. But at the end of the day, there could be significant debt relief provided through the Paris Club. So why is this not happening? There is one major hang-up in this entire process, and that is in order to qualify for Paris Club treatment, the country first needs to be in an IMF lending program. Now, you may have heard recently that the authorities and the IMF are in discussion to start an SMP, a staff-monitored program. This is a type of IMF program that we already saw in 2014 and 2015. The problem with the SMP is that it has all the structural benchmarks of a standard IMF program, but without the financial backing. The reason there's no financing attached to an SMP program is because under the IMF's lending into arrears policy, as long as the country still has official arrears outstanding, they cannot qualify for an IMF finance program. Now, you might think, you've heard of this before, this reminds you of Catch-22. Obviously, we've talked about the Paris Club arrears. Those are all official. Now, the Paris Club can offer an exemption, which would allow the IMF to go ahead and lend. The same is true with the World Bank. However, they are unwilling to provide that exemption at the moment. And the reason comes back to my previous life, where in 2015 and 16, we cleared the arrears to the fund. In doing so, it was a relatively small amount, it was about 250 million, but in doing so, what happened is that in the views of the World Bank, Zimbabwe viewed the IMF as a preferred creditor and wouldn't view the World Bank on equal terms. This has very much angered the World Bank, and as a result, makes them unwilling to provide that exemption. Now, from a PR perspective, I think this puts the World Bank in a very, very awkward position. Obviously, the mandate of the World Bank is to help countries develop. The singular aspect that is holding back Zimbabwe's development at the moment is the fact that the World Bank won't provide this exemption. Now, I understand where they're coming from. They obviously want to be paid back in full. They've seen other creditors be paid back in full, and they think that if they provide any sort of relief, they'll never see their money. On the same time, if you think about a default capitalization scenario, you have to think about under what circumstances are your odds of repayment highest? I would be under the assumption that if you provide some sort of relief, you provide that exemption, you can provide Paris Club treatment following the IMF program, you reduce the country's liabilities. At that point, Zimbabwe is in a much, much stronger position to repay the loan to the bank. But this is obviously the major sticking point. Until the arrears with the World Bank, the AFDB, and the European Investment Bank can be cleared, the country cannot qualify for an IMF lending program. Therefore, they cannot qualify for Paris Club treatment, and we cannot reduce those arrears. Now, simultaneously, it makes it very difficult for the country to raise external financing as long as they still have these arrears outstanding. There's obviously been talk about a Eurobond issuance. That is something that I think all of us in this room would like to see. Obviously, it's a question of timing. But how many times have you heard of a country issuing a Eurobond while having roughly $7 billion in external arrears, right? That is obviously not the ideal situation in terms of timing. So it really, we sort of have to take that step back, and again, sort of think about this catch-22 scenario where in order to clear their arrears, they have to first clear their arrears. So what is the answer? And I think that is really the challenge that my colleagues on stage with me will have to address. Now, I think there's a few things that we can do going forward that will improve their odds. Obviously, addressing the structural aspects of the economy, reducing the fiscal deficit through fiscal consolidation, increasing exports, bringing dollars in, staying current on the PDI, re-engaging with the international community, and part of that will be the SMP process, or the SMP program with the IMF. All of those things, and especially engaging with international investors such as yourselves in this type of environment, obviously something that has been sorely lacking over the last 30 years. And we've seen a tremendous pickup, this being the third conference that we've hosted since March, are all valuable steps in that process of ultimately trying to address the question of arrears clearance and ultimately moving forward. But these remain challenges. So I will go ahead and take your question first, but I've been told that we need to make sure we pass around the microphones. So please, if you could stand up, introduce yourself, so your name, the organization who you work for, and then your question, but please make sure you have a microphone in hand before you do so.
And for efficiency, let's do 3 questions at a time.
Absolutely. So, somebody.
My name is Prof. I'm the chairman of African Medical Investments. We have a footprint in Zimbabwe, and I was just there in Zimbabwe late August, early September. I spent a week there, went around Harare, Bulawayo, Victoria Falls. Now, we are planning to launch a healthcare fund, and Zimbabwe would be our initial base, but we will cover the Zambezi River countries. Okay. You raised a very important central issue. My experience in the week that I was there is that the country has no dollars at all. And it survives on an ingenious system of debit cards and a wallet system. I myself used a debit card, a Barclays debit card. Now when I settled at the end, the dollars that you mentioned, the local debt, 6 billion, it was settled, my particular case was settled at 1.85. So why wouldn't the 6 billion be settled at 1.85 if you lop off 3 billion in debt?
Excellent question. So we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll go through all of them at once. So we have 2 questions right here in the front.
I think I have the mic.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tendai Kapidze. I'm chief economist here in New York at Lending Tree, but just here in my personal capacity as a citizen of Zimbabwe. Question for the Minister of Finance. Earlier this year, there was an announcement that Zimbabwe would be selling off a lot of the state-owned enterprises. And I think the enterprise values of those enterprises is around 14 or 15 billion. I guess what progress has been made, and what are your next milestones? And just to put that in terms of the broader economic questions in Zimbabwe, when I was there in April, probably the only sector that has seen real development and that works efficiently is the telecom cell phone sector. And that has the benefit of having a strong private competitor to the state-owned enterprises. So what's the plan with the state-owned enterprises? How do we privatize those to create greater efficiency in other sectors of the economy? Thank you.
And right here in the front as well.
My name is Daniel McConvey. I'm with Rossport Investments. We're a mining fund here in downtown New York. And we've been investors in Zimbabwe off and on over the last 10 to 15 years. Mr. President, honorable ministers, and Governor, you have a challenge in mining investing because of the capital intensity. And a lot of investors, including myself, have had the threat of higher taxes or something else wrong with a partner for years. And it really, life's too short for a lot of us to live through this. And I know the government's changed, but if you're going to get the capital investment, you're going to have to try to find an extra way to provide the security of that investment and the ability of getting that money out, short term, or medium term, or longer term. And how can you do that? One thing that comes to mind is maybe having a stabilization agreement for 5 or 10 years where they can live through, the company knows with higher certainty the tax rate's not going to change, the tenures are not going to change, the rules are not going to change. Is that something you would consider? And just another point now, in Tanzania right now we're going through another thing where the rules are changing, and that makes a lot of investors nervous about African countries, and that's one of the challenges too, just in the region. Thank you.
Okay, so I will start by addressing your question, but I think ultimately it's probably a better question for the Reserve Bank Governor. To your question, why is it not settled at 1.85? To be honest, I can't answer that. The reason that that's not something that I think has gotten as much attention as you might think is because generally people such as the IMF, the World Bank, sort of international economists don't tend to worry about domestic debt to the same degree that they worry about external debt for a variety of reasons. One, external debt obviously can't be rebased. It's owed in dollars. We know the terms. Obviously, those terms can change under certain conditions, that being the Paris Club or maturity extensions, et cetera. But in terms of the domestic debt, regardless of the currency, the country always maintains sovereign immunity. So there are ways that you can reduce a debt stock. That typically, if the debt is denominated in local currency, through seniorage, you can inflate away that debt stock. So we tend to not think about it in sort of as significant of terms. Now, the Zimbabwe example is a little bit different because it's obviously still dollarized and you don't have that ability. That being said, through tax policy, monetary policy, banking law, et cetera, there are ways that you can reduce the liability. Now, you can either just repay it at 1.85, which would basically reduce the total liability by about 45%, or you could repay it in full, but through tax policy, change those laws so you basically tax back any of those earnings or the principal repayment. So I'm not saying that that is the situation in Zimbabwe or what should be done going forward, but as a result, that's one of the reasons why domestic debt tends not to be considered to sort of the same degree as external debt. But sort of in regards to the specifics of how that repayment might work, I think I'll pass it over to the governor.
Thank you very much, Chris, also for the explanation. Let me just explain what he was referring to. Is that we've got electronic dollars and we've got the real dollars. That's what I was referring to. And that within the RTGS dollars, which is electronic dollars, you are converting 1 to 185. That's what I was referring to. Now, that is not the official position of government. Number two is that if you have that haircut for all the debt of Zimbabwe, it means that, as I said earlier, it means that you are devaluing people's investors' funds in the country. Basically, you are eroding value. It might have a far-reaching consequences in the economy, because it means that the pricing regime will need to change to follow the same pattern. And hence, that what you might have is something that the consequences or the unintended consequences are far-reaching than a simple haircut on the debt of Zimbabwe. Yes, our vision is to become a cash-light society, where you use your plastic money, you use your internet banking, you use your mobile banking platforms, just what you do in America. You use your credit cards much more than cash. The problem in Zimbabwe, just like in Africa, is that we use cash more predominantly than cards. If you use credit cards, if you use cards in Zimbabwe, mobile bank cards, or the internet banking, there will be less pressure in the banking sector for the cash. Then you can preserve the cash for imports purposes. If you look, for example, in the gold, we pay our artisan miners 70% cash, as opposed to pay them more in electronic money. Even here in America, where there is a GDP of more than about $19 trillion, not all of that one is cash backed. Your banks, your deposits are about 14 trillion, but the banks don't have $14 trillion in cash. You've got about $1.3 trillion in cash, which is 10% of the deposit base. Yes, yet in a country like Zimbabwe, you want to match the bank deposit to cash. It never happened in anywhere anywhere in the world, even China, where there are 1.3 billion people. So we are praying for a culture change, whereby people understand that money is not cash, but that cash is part of money. That's what we are talking about. So in any case, what we're referring to, your card, I think it was more of you using the card in the local debt, but in terms of settlement, all cross-border payments are one-to-one. That's what we do in Zimbabwe. But we have taken note of your concern, and the way to do it is to increase the supply of foreign currency, of dollars, and to reduce the genesis of money creation in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
To add, we'll be making further announcements around those arrangements in monetary policy at the end of the month when the governor presents the monetary policy statement. Also hasten to say that, you know, the trend in terms of the use of mobile banking is not just unique to Zimbabwe. A lot of other countries are doing that. Kenya has been the leader for a while. Zimbabwe has caught up, you know, very quickly, because also it was a solution for liquidity problems. We have Ivory Coast, we have Uganda, we have Tanzania. So this is not unique to Zimbabwe. Come to the question of privatization. You said what, Fadzai, you said? Tendai. Yes, what we've done an exercise as government and categorize the various state-owned enterprises, the SOEs, into obviously those that are privatizable, if I can create a new word, and those that can be restructured, and those that can be basically liquidated because they're just not viable. We've done that categorization already, but we know the cross-cutting issues, regardless of category, is issues about strengthening management, governance, the strategies of various SOEs. We've done all of that exercise. Some of them are already further ahead in terms of those that are privatizable, engaging potential investors and advisors to just make it happen and do that. We mentioned the telecom sector. That's an easy one. You know, companies such as Net1 and so forth, Telecel, those are easily privatizable. You'll see a lot more happen in terms of privatization going forward. Of course, those that are not privatizable but are marginal, don't fall into, let's say, the liquidation category. We have to think of ways of sorting out their debt, cleaning up the balance sheet. I mean, there's so many ideas. These are just ideas. You could even create a kind of bad bank where those loans are, or rather the debt is put in a special purpose vehicle from a bad bank, clean up the balance sheet, but make sure that the company still continues to service the interest on that on the SPV where the debt is held. So many ideas that we can do. We're looking at all of those, and I think we'll make an announcement as we progress on that part. Now, there's a question also on what I think is basically was policy volatility about mining, where you say, look, we are basically saying, look, we need policy consistency. We cannot invest if there's policy volatility. That's what we're here to deliver. That's what the new dispensation in Zimbabwe is here to deliver. Often policy volatility comes from policy volatility on the fiscal front. And since I supervise the fiscal front, I'm determined that there should not be fiscal volatility in that regard. And then what we'll see us do is adopt basically a kind of 3-year forward-looking budgetary process where we have an idea, in some sense, as to where the budget deficit is headed over a 3-year period, and provide that policy settlement and less volatility. Some of the volatility may be regulatory by way, and again, make sure that there's no reversals that may harm your business. But also there are no reversals on the fiscal regime for the mining sector, where there's royalties, where there's the corporate tax interaction, and other levels. There's some consistency. We're determined to deliver that. We're aware that this has been a challenge in the past.
So we'll go ahead and take 3 more questions. One right here, one in the doorway, and maybe something from the right-hand side of the room. There we go, right there in the middle.
Mine is more of a compliment than a question. My name is Nathan. I come from Johannesburg. I've watched Zimbabwe for the last 20 years, and I know its potential. The question I wanted to ask to the panel, why can't you set up a sovereign wealth fund for Zimbabwe? I think there are plenty of people that are willing to invest. I'll be the first one to invest as an African. We shouldn't be going to the world with a begging bowl. I see all our airports are always busy. All the hotels are always busy. Yet when it comes to making an investment in the sovereign state, we don't do it, you know. Thanks, man.
We have a question in the doorway.
Sure.
If we could, can we?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nana Minya Ayensu. I work for General Electric. So first of all, thank you all very much for coming today. Just wanted to ask a little bit to the extent to which you all cover your energy sector. I know as of last year you were looking to develop a new framework around trying to develop a framework around independent power production and so on in the area, and also as part of your national energy policy to help promote the development of renewables and other types of energy. And I think you all alluded to it in your opening remarks. I'm just wondering if you could provide a bit of an update on what kinds of policies and structures that you're all putting in place to encourage the safe development of power projects and so on in the area.
Third question is Patrick Chidley here with 3PPB. We're a mining advisor based here in the States. We've got some interest in Zimbabwe at the moment. So my question is just a monetary policy question, just really to ask, what's the scope for raising interest rates in dollars in Zimbabwe, and would that be something to help bring money in the country?
Okay. If I could start on the question of the sovereign wealth fund. Zimbabwe has a sovereign wealth fund, but it's been growing slowly. It was launched in 2015. And obviously the sovereign wealth fund is a mechanism for dealing with intergenerational equity, as you know, to make sure that the resources that are being extracted now, some of those benefits can also be transferred to future generations. Either in the form of investment or in the form of infrastructure specifically. So we have the fund. So I think you will see us begin to put more capital into from royalties and other sources of revenue for the government. This is very important. So we will be doing that. It exists. It just hasn't moved fast enough in terms of growth, but it's going to happen. And I think really the ideal asset allocation would be investment in infrastructure, and then some investments in stable liquid assets. And then the third is to support recurrent expenditure in terms of the budget. That is a normal asset allocation. If we check, for instance, the sovereign wealth fund in Botswana, for example, or Algeria, that is how it is structured. So over time, that's the asset allocation that we're going to put in place. But we have it already. We'll see it grow.
Thank you. The last question, which was made on the why not raising the US dollar rates in Zimbabwe so as to attract dollar flow. A brilliant question. That's one of the issues that we'll be working on our mandatory policy measures, because bearing in mind that right now the electronic dollars are commingling with the real dollars, and therefore it means that we want to put some policy measures that talks to what you are saying, but at the same time that talks to non-commingling of the two. Thank you. I hope I make sense to yeah, thank you.
And then we have one more question about energy generation capacity, transmission and distribution across the country.
Absolutely, as a country, we need more generation capacity. Absolutely. So we now have a window where independent power producers can be active in the market. That has been opened up, and you can link into the transmission platform and then sell electricity. There's no impediment at all. We're looking forward to seeing you in Zimbabwe. We already have a few who have gotten their licenses and their PC contracts in place. So that's open.
So I think we'll do 3 more questions.
Just on that one, may I say a day or two just before we came here, I had discussions with a company from California. There's technology now in the United States which is new on the continent. In the past, if you want thermal power, you go where the coal is, produce it, and then transmit the energy to where it is required. If you are using hydro, you go to the river or dam where it is produced, and then transmit it to where it is required. But there is now a company that's about 10, 12 years old in California, United States, which produces energy through lithium battery mechanism or technology on site, and are very eager to do the same. And we're in the middle of negotiations for first phase 2,000 megawatts, second phase up to 8,000 megawatts, but produced on site. It's very exciting.
Very exciting indeed. But also we've got the methane gas. So again, you could use that resource for producing power in addition to the lithium and the coal and the hydro. But also sunshine in terms of solar produced power. So many options.
So in the sake of time, I think we'll take 3 more questions. We have one right here in the front, one in the middle of the room, and the final question back there.
Yeah, my name's Paul Hinks. I'm the chief executive of an energy company, a power company called Symbian Power. We're interested in investing in Zimbabwe. But I'm also the chairman of a members association group called Invest Africa in the United States. We had the pleasure of visiting Zimbabwe about a month or so before the election, and we were hosted by His Excellency, and it was a fantastic event. We were 22 people, and I can tell you, Your Excellency, that every single person that left after that visit was extremely positive, and they're already talking about doing real investments in the country. But what I wanted to do is to bring up something that no one's talked about, which is a difficult one, because we're in America. This sanctions. Okay, so we have the sanctions, and because we went to Zimbabwe a month or so before the election, we all followed, and I followed personally, the election process. It was difficult, no doubt. So are many in Africa, frankly, so many in the world. This wasn't so great here. And what's happened since is during that process and thereafter, there are quite a lot of groups, particularly in Washington, of course, lobby groups, who were supporting your opponents. And they're still supporting your opponents. And what's been happening is that many of the good things, which I get because I get this News 24 from South Africa and Zimbabwe and things like that. I read it. So I have seen the good things, the way you reacted to the Tendai BT issue, the statements you made about international investigators coming in to look at the violence that occurred. That story of the good things you said is not getting out in Washington. Only the negatives is getting out in Washington. And so it's important. I'm playing the role I can. And for example, I have a meeting in 2 weeks' time with the head of OFAC. And we've retained, best effort, we've retained some specialist sanctions lawyers. But many of us are trying to get through to people on Capitol Hill and in the White House that these sanctions are not fair and they have to be dropped. And what we're hearing is that there are some senators, including people like Jeff Flake, who was in Zimbabwe during the election itself, Chris Coons. There are some people that have moderated their views and really are not feeling like punishing the people of Zimbabwe over what happened during the elections. So my only, as I say, it's not a question so much as an advice or something to point out, but the more you can do to help in DC, I'm sitting next to the ambassador here, so I should be addressing the ambassador, to help in DC, I think those sanctions will go. But it needs a big effort from the Zimbabwe government and all the supporters of Zimbabwe so that we can get on and do business in the country that's open for business.
So maybe not so much an answer, but a sort of reaction to the comments, which I think a lot of us would be very interested in hearing. Then we have one more question in the middle of the room.
My name is Deborah Nyasha Peters. I actually live in Zimbabwe. I'm a fund manager. I spent 8 years here in New York, in Wall Street. Then I went to South Africa, project finance for ESCOM. And then I went to Nigeria, running a PE fund in real estate. So now I'm back in Zimbabwe 5 years. First of all, I have the dubious honor of having run for elections for local government in Ward 7 in the last election. I was an independent. I did not win, but I was going to ask about that. Yeah, but State House is in my ward, so you were under my area. So my question is...
Watch out, your electorate is here.
Yes. My question is about the Zimbabwe Investment Authority, because I still have my clients in West Africa, in Ghana, and we're competing against the likes of Rwanda, where you can open a company, a business quickly. Zimbabwe is still very bureaucratic. Zimbabwe Investment Authority is not very good at articulating the merits of the country as an investment destination. And there's talk about setting up a Zimbabwe Investment Development Authority, ZIDA. I hope that ZIDA will not be ZIA, the old authority just rehashed and given a new name, because we really need some help in that area. I have lots of investors coming to ask questions, trying to get things done, and they always have to go through all this bureaucracy.
And then we have the final question over here on the right-hand side of the room.
Hi there. My name is Steve. I'm with Excellency Capital. I work with several families who own some of the largest companies, agricultural concerns in Africa. Everybody's looking at Zimbabwe. Everybody wants to invest in the agricultural sector. And I hear you guys talk about you guys want investment, but not once did you guys mention any strategy for the agriculture. You guys talk about the tobacco sector. I mean, have you guys talked to JTI or Altria or someone and say, look, you know, we don't want to export blends anymore. We just want you guys to produce it here. You know, I mean, is there a strategy to bring direct investment into the country? It seems like it's actually missing. You guys haven't mentioned it once. You guys say come here and invest, but you know, if you guys have, you know, if you guys have an oligopoly of tobacco. It just seems kind of, like a natural sector. So, I look at Zimbabwe because it's, doesn't have port facilities. It's more like a Botswana, and Botswana, the only way that they're kind of getting ahead is they're putting value added. I mean, even if you just look at the diamond sector, just polishing out diamonds adds so much more to the economy. Something like tobacco should be that strategy. And I represent, I'm more in line with the sugar industry, but I'm just thinking out loud. You guys are painting very broad strokes here. Do you guys have anything that is more of a direct attack on drawing major investment into value-added sectors?
So I think what we'll do is we'll actually address these questions in reverse order. That way, His Excellency can address the issue about sanctions last. I think that'll probably be an excellent point to end on. So, if you want to...
Let me deal with the question on that one from Nyasha Peters. Sorry you lost your action, but try again next time. ZANU-PF was a lot stronger, is it? Now, I didn't even attempt, so I guess you tried. I agree with you that we have so much competition in terms of attracting investment, and the new Zimbabwe Investment Authority needs to be efficient, needs to act quickly and realize that it is in competition with other countries, Rwanda, Ghana, to mention a few. I can only agree with you that it should be efficient, it should realize it is in competition and just deliver value for investors and really become a one-stop shop. It is our intention to make it so. I can assure that, I repeat, it is our intention to make it so.
Thank you. The last question on value addition. Definitely, Zimbabwe's policy is to increase value addition on its products. That relates not only to mining and other sectors, manufacturing, but also agriculture. We're looking at a high-tech type of agriculture. Zimbabwe used to export almost number one, I think, in Africa in terms of horticulture. We want to beneficiate, want to increase, want to go back way before. Yes, if you talk of tobacco, the idea is to add value, make cigarettes. And therefore, Zimbabwe is open for business for those companies that want to beneficiate the tobacco to produce cigarettes. So at the end of the day, we add value to our tobacco, and that we add value even to maize. We used to produce maize oil from maize, and soya bean we produce both the stock feeds and the cooking oil. So yes, you are very right that whilst we do not speak much about it, but that's government policy to add value to the agricultural sector, to have a high tech, to have more drip irrigation, which minimizes water as we go into these climatic changes. So yes, you are spot on, and I think what you are saying resonates very well with what you are doing. Let me end by saying that Zimbabwe is a frontier market. Investing in Zimbabwe, it is a must, because that is why everything can happen. The good soils for blueberries, for even things like the mangoes, which are very good, oranges, sugarcane. Yes, we need to also evaluate from art, maybe that we are in sugar, because if you look at Zimbabwe, in the southern region, we have got places where we are producing plenty of sugar. We need to add value in the sugar, from the raw sugar to sugar itself to ethanol, which you can also use for blending with the fuel, we're currently doing. So yes, there's plenty of value for value addition in agriculture. Thank you very much.
But excuse me, but have you targeted strategic partners for such things, or are you just saying we're open for business? Have you contacted strategic partners?
Yeah, we'll be very happy to discuss with you those strategic partners that are there as we do a bilateral discussion. It's obvious we also need pointers. That's one reason why we are here, to get all those pointers and areas where we can also improve. We are improvement is our goal, to show that we keep on improving. Thank you very much.
Now the final question for His Excellency, the issue of sanctions, also the PR story. Why in Washington, New York, London, etc., do we only hear the bad side of what's happening in Zimbabwe, and we frequently miss the positives that are actually happening on the ground?
Well, thank you very much. Before I tackle the sanctions issue, I would like to add a small point in relation to Nyasha's concerns. There has been perception on Zimbabwe for nearly 2 decades as an isolated, bad country with inconsistent policies, governance, rule of law, human rights, all negative perception was existent with regard to Zimbabwe. But since the new dispensation, we're trying to clear that air. And we invite people left, right, and center to come to Zimbabwe for themselves, people to experience what actually Zimbabwe is. This is why my brother here says when Senator Jeff Fleck, Kuhn, and that delegation, when they came there, they're very negative. But when they left, they were our ambassadors. Just because they were able to look at the concrete situation on the ground, not the perception that is pervaded across the world by media and so on. So we invite those who think Zimbabwe is not a good destination for investment to come to Zimbabwe physically and experience the atmosphere and environment in our country. You have talked about the ease of doing business. Yes, when we had our meeting in March in Kigali, that's Rwanda, I met President Kagame, and to interest myself as to how he achieved what he has now, the environment in Kigali. I had a long discussion, and in the end, he sent me a team led by the lady who is head of the, what do you call it? Rwanda Investment Board, Clara somebody. And they came to Zimbabwe, spent a week with mayor officials as well as government ministers in Zimbabwe. One example is that in the past we used to take about 2 to 3 months to register a company in Zimbabwe. Now we are down to 2 days maximum. We have experiences of doing it within a day now, as a result of removing all the archaic legislation and procedures that are necessary to achieve the ease of doing business and the cost of doing business. And a lot is being done in terms of reforms in that area so that we become competitive. So I just wanted to add to what my new minister has said about in reply to your question. Now, with regard to sanctions, initially sanctions, the quarrel was not between the people of the United States of America and the people of Zimbabwe. The quarrel was between Zimbabwe and the United Kingdom. It was a bilateral quarrel. But the British were able to internationalize our bilateral quarrel between ourselves and them, which robbed in the EU. And in the end, it robbed in the Americans through the former President Bush. And in Britain, there was Tony Blair. But I'm happy now we have a lady. You know, when we got our independence in 1980, or 1979, there was a very serious war in Zimbabwe against Ian Smith. But there was a change of government in the United Kingdom, and Margaret Thatcher came to power. She was the person who ended our war. So anything, each time there's a lady in Britain, things change. This time around, on the 24th
4th of November, when I was inaugurated, within 35 minutes, I had a minister from Theresa May calling on me. And our relations with Britain have improved tremendously, and they were now talking. So America is left out in the cold by the British and the EU. But I'm happy that also in Germany, there's a lady. She has sent a minister to Germany to come and again resuscitate relations between Zimbabwe and Germany. And they were so happy with Germany. The same with, in France, there's a man, but again, it's very good. Oh, I don't know about that one. So, the basic point I'm mentioning is that there is no problem, there is no quarrel between the people of Zimbabwe and the people of America. Historically or currently, there is no quarrel. The quarrel is at the level of administration, where Zidera was put. I will not go into that history. But just now, the signals that are coming from Washington are very positive. I have no doubt that in no time we should be able to reconcile and move forward and cooperate with the United States administration. I have no doubt that Zimbabwe again will be embraced in the community of nations. This is what we are doing, and re-engage with those who are disengaged with us, engage with those who had never engaged with us. This is the policy we are following. And I'm happy that my brother here, when they left Zimbabwe, they had a different view of what is there. So it is most important that perception is very, very critical. It can lead people to believe in things that are not actually correct on the ground. Yes, the lobby here favors the opposition, but the voter on the ground actually look at what is being offered. I've only been in office for 8 months, but I was able to win the elections in Zimbabwe. I had 50.6%. The next year, highest person had 44%. So in terms of our Commonwealth parliamentary democracy, that difference is enough. In fact, one vote beyond your opponent is enough for you under Commonwealth parliamentary democracy to rule, like Harold Wilson. In 1964, he had only one seat, and he ruled the UK. I have over 300,000 votes in excess. But I also have 2/3 majority in parliament. So that issue is not of any concern in my view. We are there. But most importantly, my mantra is peace, peace, unity, unity, and love, and integration in the community of nations. And I thank you. I mentioned about the negative media here in Washington. I have my ambassador here. I said my ambassador is doing his best, but global media is stronger than the village media of Zimbabwe. But we will continue, although being so small, we will continue to say we are not what you are saying we are. We really are what we are. And they come and look at us, and you know who we are by looking at us practically. I think.
On that note, thank you, Excellency. Thank you, colleagues. Let me hand over to Dean.
Thank you very much. As a British citizen, I really can't spend too much time apologising for Tony Blair and everything there. So we'll move on from that. 22 years now I've been involved in emerging market investing, and if you haven't been to Zimbabwe, I really do strongly recommend it. Out of all the countries that I've travelled to across emerging markets, there's not many that within an hour of landing, I had my luggage, I had my visa, and was drinking a gin and tonic in a very nice hotel right in the centre of town. So definitely worth going to. I think this administration really does understand the challenges ahead of it. I think the administration really understands as well the missteps some of the African countries have made, some of the countries that we've not mentioned as role models in this afternoon's discussion. But what they also understand is really the golden opportunity that they have in front of them right now for a real paradigm shift in what can be achieved, especially with your help in a symbiotic partnership that this administration under His Excellency is looking to forge with the investor base over here in America. So, Your Excellency, Minister and Governor, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. Thank you.